You'd think a woman carrying a box labeled kitchen towels wouldn't trigger a full-blown police response. But this is Maple Ridge, and the HOA here is run by a woman named Beverly. Yeah, she's exactly what you're picturing. Short, sharp bob haircut, oversized sunglasses even when it's cloudy, and a clipboard that might as well be welded to her arm. My wife, Sienna, was unloading the last few boxes from our pickup while I was inside hooking up the washer. We just bought the house at the end of the cull to sack a tired place with good bones and way too many rules posted on the mailbox. I figured the worst we'd have to deal with was the occasional snippy notice about lawn length. I was dead wrong. "Excuse me," I heard outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of a throat clearing with the intent to dominate. I looked out the front window. There stood Beverly in all her HOA glory, pointing at Sienna like she'd caught her stealing copper wire. "You can't just move in like this without notifying the HOA," she barked, arms flailing like she was directing traffic during an emergency. Sienna, bless her, didn't even flinch. "We closed yesterday. We're just getting settled." Beverly's eyes narrowed like she'd just been challenged on Jeopardy! "You're not on file. There's a process. You can't just start hauling things in. We've had break-ins, you know." "I live here," Sienna said, carefully setting down a box labeled spices. "My name's right there on the deed." "Then I'm calling the sheriff," Beverly snapped. "We have protocols." "You could be squatters for all I know." I stepped outside right about then, wiping my hands on a rag. "Ma'am, we just bought the place. Charles Carter. My name's in the county record." Beverly ignored me and pulled out her phone like she was summoning the president. "Yes, hello, I need a sheriff to come out. Suspicious activity. Possible illegal occupancy. A woman is moving boxes in. Yes, now." I stood there in disbelief. "Illegal occupancy? Are you serious?" She turned her back on me. "I have a duty to protect this neighborhood." Sienna rolled her eyes and grabbed another box. "From what? Matching dishware?" We both knew what this was. Beverly didn't like that we hadn't begged for her blessing to move in. More than that, she didn't like being ignored. 15 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up. A tall man in his 50s stepped out, sunglasses on, badge gleaming. I'd barely opened my mouth when Beverly marched up to him like she was about to hand him a trophy. "Thank the Lord." "Officer, they're trespassing." "I told them they're not authorized to be here. I'm the HOA president, Beverly Tinsley." The sheriff didn't say a word. He looked over at me, then at Sienna, who was still carrying a box, completely unbothered, and then his eyes landed on her face. His entire expression changed. He walked straight up to her and gave a sharp salute. "Major Rivera," he said. "Ma'am, I didn't realize you were back stateside." Beverly blinked like she'd been hit with a stun gun. "Wait, what?" Sienna set the box down gently and smiled. "Good to see you again, Sheriff. Charlie and I just closed on the house. I figured we'd get a warm welcome." "You picked a good one," he said, nodding toward me. "You two need anything, you let me know. I'll make sure the department has your address on file." Beverly's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her clipboard drooped a little. The sheriff turned to her, suddenly dead serious. "Ma'am, making false reports to law enforcement is a misdemeanor. Consider this your warning. Next time I'll have no choice but to issue a citation." She tried to recover, but I didn't know who she was. "They looked suspicious." Sienna tilted her head. "Suspicious how?" Beverly turned redder than a stop sign. "You didn't follow the HOA move-in notification process." "I'm not required to," I said. "There's nothing in the bylaws that requires homeowners to notify the HOA before moving in." "I read the whole packet." The sheriff gave Beverly a long look. "If I get another call like this, I'll assume there's harassment involved." And just like that, Beverly walked off without another word, heels clicking like gunshots across the sidewalk. Sienna chuckled. "Well, that was quick." "Yeah," I said. "But something tells me this won't be the last time she tries something." 3 days passed without a word from Beverly. No notes taped to our door, no clipboard bearing confrontations, no passive-aggressive welcome letters. It was quiet, unnaturally so. The kind of silence you get before a thunderstorm rolls in. I noticed it first when I went to take the trash out. The bins we'd placed at the edge of the driveway were gone. Not knocked over, not misplaced, completely gone. I stood there looking at the empty patch of sidewalk like maybe I'd forgotten where I left them. I knocked on the neighbor's door, an older guy named Frank who'd waved at us during the move-in. He leaned against the frame, sipping a mug that said retired, not expired. "Hey, Frank," I said. "You see anyone mess with our trash bins?" He lowered his mug. "You're on Beverly's radar now," he said. "She's done it before, calls it enforcing sanitation standards, claims any bins not numbered with HOA-issued decals are improperly tagged." "We just got here," I said. "They were brand new," Frank nodded. "Doesn't matter. She keeps a list. If something isn't registered with her committee, it violates property aesthetics protocols. Is that even legal?" He chuckled. "Not even close." But she pushes until someone pushes back. I thanked him and went back inside to tell Sienna. She was cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through a binder full of documents. Her laptop was open, screen glowing with the county records site. "She's been submitting amendments," Sienna said without looking up. 12 of them over the last 6 months, quiet ones. Stuff buried in paragraph 7 of clause 3, she's trying to expand board authority. What kind of authority? Fines, inspections, revocation of homeowner privileges. She's even trying to get a clause passed that would let the HOA place a lien if dues are unpaid for 30 days. That's not just overreach, that's predatory. She's betting no one reads the footnotes. I sat beside her. "How do we stop her?" Sienna tapped a few keys and pulled up a scanned letter dated last month. "We don't yet, but we watch, and we document everything." That night, we installed a pair of discrete security cameras, one above the garage, another facing the side yard. Not flashy, just enough to catch anything that wandered onto our property. The next morning, we got our first ping. I opened the footage on my phone and watched as a shadow crept across the lawn just before 5 a.m. The figure wore a wide-brimmed hat and moved like someone trying not to wake the dead. She reached our front steps and pulled something from her oversized purse, what looked like a measuring tape, and began tugging it across the porch. She paused, scribbled something on a notepad, then paced the width of the flower bed. When she turned, the camera caught her face perfectly. "Beverly," I called Sienna over. "She's measuring our landscaping," I said. At 5 in the morning, Sienna frowned. "She's building a case. Probably going to claim we violated spacing regulations for ornamental plants." I zoomed in on the notepad. The footage was grainy, but we could make out the words "non-uniform border spacing" and "exceeds HOA flowerbed depth." "She's making it up as she goes," I said. "No," Sienna said, eyes narrowing. "She's trying to manufacture violations so she can trigger penalty clauses." 2 hours later, a letter arrived hand-delivered, not mailed. A folded sheet of paper sealed with the HOA's outdated emblem. It read, "Dear homeowners, after a routine inspection, several discrepancies have been noted on your property, including unauthorized landscaping modifications and the absence of HOA-compliant waste receptacles. You are hereby notified to appear before the HOA Violation Committee on Saturday at 9 a.m. Failure to appear will result in immediate penalties, including daily fines." I stared at it, then looked at Sienna. "She's setting a trap." "No." "She's setting herself up," Sienna said, flipping open her laptop again. "Because what she doesn't know is that she just violated the 4th Amendment. She trespassed." "Exactly. And I'm going to make sure the right people see the proof." That Friday, we visited the county records office and requested the HOA's Articles of Incorporation and the original bylaws. The clerk, a woman named Marcia with a pencil stuck in her bun, took one look at the request and sighed. "You're not the first to come in here asking about Maple Ridge," she said. "Beverly's been filing amendments like she's rewriting the Constitution." Sienna scanned the documents. "This one's missing required signatures," Marcia nodded. "That one was filed without quorum." "The board's supposed to have 5 members. Right now, it's just Beverly and a guy named Dale who hasn't shown up to a meeting in 8 months. She's passing amendments without a proper board. Yep, Marcia said. And if you can prove it, the entire structure collapses. We thanked her and left with scanned copies of every amendment board record and filing related to Maple Ridge going back 5 years. That Saturday, we walked into the community center right at 9. Beverly sat at the far end of a folding table, arms crossed, a stack of papers in front of her. A man in a faded polo shirt sat beside her, staring at nothing. "Please state your names for the record," Beverly said, not looking up. Sienna set her phone on the table and pressed record. "Major Sienna Rivera. This is my husband, Charles Carter. We're here under protest." Beverly adjusted her glasses. "You're here because you violated community guidelines. Your flower bed exceeds the allowed width by you trespassed," Sienna interrupted. "At 5 a.m., without notice and without consent. We have it on camera." Beverly blinked. "And we have documentation from the county records office showing your last 3 amendments were filed without quorum, which violates your own charter." The man in the polo shirt shifted uncomfortably. "Wait a minute, what?" Sienna turned to him. "You're Dale," he nodded slowly. "You haven't attended a meeting since last year, yet your name is on every one of these amendments." "I didn't sign anything," he said. Beverly's face went pale. "What you've done," I said, "is commit fraud. You forged signatures to pass illegal amendments. You've also committed criminal trespass and, if I'm not mistaken, attempted extortion by threatening liens based on fabricated violations." "You can't prove." "We can," Sienna said, holding up the USB drive. "We've already shared everything with the sheriff's office. They're reviewing it now." Beverly stood abruptly. "This isn't how this works. I run this community." "Not anymore," I said. "You violated your own authority. This committee is dissolved until the county investigates. Any further fines or notices from you will be considered harassment." Dale stood too. "I'm done. I'm not signing anything else." Beverly looked around like she was expecting someone to rescue her, but no one came. The room was empty except for us. We walked out without another word. By Monday, the sheriff had launched a formal investigation into the HOA. A notice was posted at the entrance to the neighborhood, stating that all HOA enforcement actions were suspended pending review. Trash bins reappeared mysteriously on our driveway, and Beverly. She disappeared from the neighborhood entirely. Her house went dark. No more measuring tape missions. No more clipboard patrols. But the best part came a week later when a letter arrived from the county court. A subpoena naming her in an official inquiry into HOA fraud and abuse of authority. Sienna read it aloud, then tossed it on the coffee table. "She wanted power," she said. "Now she gets to explain how she used it in court." I leaned back in the chair, watching the neighbor kids ride their scooters in the cul-de-sac. "That," I said, "is what justice looks like." The morning after the subpoena was delivered, I was out back trimming the overgrown hedge when a county vehicle pulled up in front of Beverly's house. 2 plainclothes investigators stepped out, clipped IDs swinging from their necks, and walked straight up the path. No clipboard, no warning. I paused, pruning shears in hand, and watched through the leaves while they knocked. No answer. After a few moments, one of them circled to the side gate, tested it, then disappeared into the backyard. The other waited at the front, arms folded, eyes scanning the street. 5 minutes later, the one who disappeared re-emerged, waving the other over. They both vanished behind the house again. I set down the shears and walked inside. "She's being investigated for something more than paperwork fraud," I said. Sienna was at the kitchen table, sorting receipts from the last few weeks. I was hoping they'd dig deeper. "There's more under the surface." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a manila folder with a red tab on the corner. "I've been compiling complaints from other neighbors. Most of them never reported anything formally, but I've been collecting statements for the county." "What kind of complaints?" "Unlawful entry, tampering with mailboxes, One woman said her dog went missing for 3 days and came back with a cut on his leg. Another family had their electrical meter box tampered with after refusing to pay a fine. I sat down slowly. That's not just power tripping, that's criminal. Exactly why I've been keeping everything documented. The county investigator who took our footage said they'd need corroborating testimonies, so I've been going door to door. She handed me a signed statement from a woman named Linda Owens. It detailed a forced architectural inspection Beverly had conducted last year, where she entered Linda's backyard without notice and removed a trellis she claimed was non-compliant. Linda had been out of town at the time. Her neighbor had caught it on a doorbell camera. "We're not just talking fines and garden gnomes anymore," Sienna said. "We're talking break-ins, vandalism, intimidation." Later that day, a town hall meeting was announced, scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center. Official notice came from the county ethics board, not the HOA. Flyers were posted at the entrance to the subdivision, and an email blast followed from the city clerk. When Thursday arrived, the parking lot was packed. Folding chairs filled the room, and every one of them was occupied. People stood along the walls, arms crossed, whispering to each other. A podium had been set up at the front, flanked by 2 members of the ethics board and a woman from the district attorney's office. Sienna and I arrived early and took seats near the front. Frank, the neighbor who'd warned us about the trash bins, gave us a nod from a few rows back. The woman from the DA's office stepped up to speak. "My name is Marlene Chen," she said. "I'm with the Public Integrity Division of the District Attorney's Office. We are currently conducting an investigation into multiple allegations of misconduct, fraud, and criminal behavior tied to the leadership of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Several people turned to whisper to one another. "We have received video evidence, sworn statements, and county records indicating that the HOA president, Beverly Tinsley, may have committed multiple felonies in the course of her duties." Someone in the back muttered, "About time." Marlene continued, "These include the unlawful forging of board member signatures, illegal surveillance, trespassing, misuse of HOA funds, and interference with private utilities. We are also investigating potential wire fraud and intimidation of witnesses." The room fell silent. Marlene flipped a page. "We are here tonight to hear from residents. If you have experienced actions by the HOA that you believe were unlawful, coercive, or retaliatory, this is your opportunity to speak under protection." An older man near the aisle stood first. "Name's Mark Elston. I had a deck installed last spring. Beverly claimed it violated visual uniformity standards. She fined me $500 and said if I didn't pay, the HOA would place a lien on my house. I paid it. But I found out later she never deposited it into the HOA account. She cashed it through a separate LLC." Marlene nodded. "Do you have documentation?" "I brought copies," he said, handing them off to a staffer. Over the next hour, more residents came forward. A single mother named Carla described coming home to find her front yard dug up and a compliance warning marker stuck in the dirt. An Iraq veteran named Darren detailed how Beverly had accused him of violating noise ordinances every time he cleaned his garage, even though no one else had complained. Each story added weight to the growing file. Then Sienna stood. "My name is Major Sienna Rivera," she said. "I moved here with my husband 3 weeks ago. On our first day, your HOA president called the sheriff on us while I was carrying boxes into our home. She falsely claimed we were trespassing, despite the deed being recorded with the county. The sheriff recognized me from my military service and warned her about false reports. Within days, our trash bins were stolen, and she began surveilling our property before sunrise." She handed over a flash drive. "This contains footage of her trespassing, measuring our porch, and writing fabricated violations. I've also included records from the county showing how she amended HOA bylaws without proper quorum and forged signatures." Marlene accepted it without a word. When the testimonies concluded, Marlene returned to the podium. Based on the evidence collected so far, we have frozen the HOA's financial accounts pending forensic audit. We have also issued an order preventing any further enforcement actions by the current board. A cheer erupted from the back of the room. Several people clapped. Even the ethics board members cracked thin smiles. Additionally, Marlene continued, a warrant has been issued for the arrest of Beverly Tinsley on charges of criminal fraud, unlawful entry, and misuse of community funds. She is currently in custody and being held without bail pending arraignment. The energy in the room shifted. People turned to each other, stunned, relieved, vindicated. Frank leaned forward from his chair. She's actually arrested, Marlene nodded. As of this afternoon. After the meeting, people lingered outside in clusters, talking for the first time without fear. It was like the fog had lifted. Parents let their kids ride bikes across the street again. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months exchanged phone numbers. One woman even started organizing a weekend barbecue right there in the parking lot. As we walked back to the car, Sienna glanced up at the sky. Feels like we cracked something open. You did more than that, I said. You dismantled it. No, she said with a small shake of her head. The neighborhood did. All they needed was for someone to start the fire. I opened the passenger door for her. So what now? Now we make sure it doesn't happen again. The next week, a temporary community council was formed, appointed by the city. Their job was to restructure the HOA under new rules, with full transparency and oversight from the county. Sienna was asked to serve as a liaison between the council and the residents. She accepted, under one condition. No secret votes, no buried clauses, and every meeting had to be recorded and made public. The treasurer position was handed to a retired CPA who lived 2 blocks over. The architectural committee was dissolved entirely. Fines were suspended until a full audit was completed. The shady LLC Beverly had used to siphon money turned out to be a shell company registered in another county. Investigators traced over $60,000 in unauthorized transactions, including personal travel expenses, landscaping for her private backyard, and a luxury water feature that had been installed on a property she owned outside the neighborhood. The DA filed additional charges within 10 days. As for Beverly, the last we heard, she'd been denied bail a second time after investigators discovered she'd attempted to transfer funds out of the country. One morning, while I was replacing a cracked garden light, Darren the veteran walked by with his dog and paused. Never thought anyone would take her down, he said. She underestimated who she was dealing with, I said. Good, he said, because I don't ever want to go back to the way it was. This place finally feels like a neighborhood again. And for the first time since we moved in, I believed him. The first sign that things were truly changing came when lawn chairs started appearing on front porches again. Not the regulation-compliant ones that Beverly had once insisted on, actual, mismatched chairs with faded cushions and chipped paint. One had a Hawaiian print that clashed wonderfully with the brick exterior it sat in front of. Another had cup holders duct taped to the arms. No one said a word against them. No notes, no warnings, just neighbors sitting outside, waving at one another like they'd been doing it all along. Sienna and I were walking back from the corner lot where a small community garden had started to sprout. It was unofficial, planted in the dead space where Beverly used to post laminated notices about seasonal decor timelines. Someone had pulled out the signpost and replaced it with a wooden sign that read, "Grow something, not rules." She looked over at me. It's like the place is breathing again, I nodded, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. It already did, she said. Now it's just about building something better. That night we were having dinner when our doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her 40s, dressed in business casual, with a tote bag over one shoulder and a stack of folders in her hands. She introduced herself as Elaine Madsen, an independent investigator contracted by the county's Civil Oversight Committee. I'm here to conduct follow-up interviews with residents regarding the Maple Ridge HOA, she said. Would you and Miss Rivera be willing to speak on the record? We invited her in. She sat up at the kitchen table, opened a laptop, and clicked on a recorder. I've been reviewing the financial audit, she began. The scale of mismanagement goes beyond what we anticipated. There are irregularities that suggest a coordinated effort to defraud not just residents but county programs. Sienna leaned forward. Like what? Elaine pulled out a page. There were grant funds, small community improvement stipends from the county, supposed to be used for sidewalk repairs, lighting upgrades, things that benefit public safety. The HOA applied for 3 separate grants over the last year. Those funds were deposited, but none of the work was done. I frowned. Where did the money go? Elaine tapped the paper. That's what we're tracing. The same LLC used to cash resident fines funneled over $18,000 in grant funds. We think Beverly created a fraudulent vendor list. Companies that don't exist, paper invoices, fake quotes, all signed off by her. Sienna stood and pulled a thumb drive from the drawer. You'll want this. It's our full copy of the HOA's digital correspondence archive. I pulled it from the email account listed on the last amendment before it was frozen. Elaine's eyebrows rose. You had access. She used an unsecured Google Drive link in one of her notices. I mirrored the entire folder before the shutdown. Elaine plugged it in without hesitation. You may have just handed us the missing piece. 2 weeks later, we were asked to testify before a grand jury. The courthouse was a gray, unassuming building tucked between a library and a tax office. We entered through a side door and waited in a small, windowless room with a few other residents. A court liaison briefed us. Speak clearly, answer what you're asked, and don't speculate. When it was our turn, we walked into a room filled with 12 jurors, a county prosecutor, and a court reporter tapping away with mechanical precision. The prosecutor walked us through our statements, one piece at a time: the surveillance footage, the documents from the records office, the handwritten violations, the early morning trespass. Then came the questions. One juror, a woman with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. Miss Rivera, were you aware that the HOA had received public funding prior to your move-in? No, Sienna answered. We only became aware of the grant misuse after comparing the budget requests against the actual work done in the neighborhood. The prosecutor nodded and turned to me. Mr. Carter, did you ever witness or experience any retaliation after refusing to comply with HOA demands? Yes, I said. After we declined to pay a fabricated fine, our trash bins disappeared. We later recovered them behind a locked maintenance shed near the community pool. Another juror raised a hand. Did you have permission to access that shed? No, I said, but it was unlocked the night after the sheriff warned Beverly about harassment. Someone had clearly placed them there intentionally. The prosecutor moved on, presenting the financial records Elaine had uncovered. The jurors listened in silence as she detailed the fictitious vendors, the forged invoices, and the funds funneled into Beverly's personal mortgage account. When we finished, we were dismissed through a different exit. The liaison thanked us and handed Sienna a sealed envelope. What's this? She asked. Official notice. You've been nominated to serve on the Community Transition Board. Sienna looked at it for a moment, then tucked it into her bag without opening it. The indictment came down 6 days later. Beverly Tinsley was charged with 17 counts, including mail fraud, wire fraud, forgery, criminal trespass, and misappropriation of public funds. The judge denied bond again, citing risk of evidence tampering. Her arraignment drew a crowd that overflowed the gallery. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder with residents, and for the first time, the HOA's crimes were headline news. An emergency special election was held to form a new residential council. Sienna declined to run but did agree to moderate the candidate forum. During the Q&A, she asked each candidate one question. What will you do if someone tries to grab power the way Beverly did? The best answer came from a young mother who worked at the city library. She said, "I'll remind them that power in a community is a privilege, not a weapon." She won in a landslide. By midsummer, the neighborhood's culture had shifted entirely. Fines were replaced with community discussions. Violations became suggestions. The HOA's new name, Maple Ridge Neighborhood Collective, reflected the change. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about cooperation. One afternoon, I was staining the new fence out back when Frank appeared at the gate, holding 2 beers. He passed me one. "Heard they're starting a mural project on the side of the rec center." I raised an eyebrow. "Who's they?" "The kids," he said. "Teens from the high school, gonna paint something about second chances." I clinked the bottle against his. "Fitting." He took a sip. "Never thought I'd see the day this place had life in it again." "Sometimes," I said, "you need to tear out the rot before anything good can grow." Sienna joined us a few minutes later, wiping dirt off her hands from the planter beds she'd built along the side fence. She was smiling, and not the polite kind you offer at a grocery store. This one was real, the kind that happens when something broken finally mends. We stood there for a while, talking about nothing important. The smell of cut grass floated in from the next yard. Somewhere down the street, a radio played an old soul tune. A group of kids whizzed by on scooters, laughing, no helmets, no warnings, no laminated notices telling them to slow down. No one stopped them. No one ever would again.